All right. So we've got here a Tower Sturgeon game, which is pretty interesting. As far as I'm aware, I think you guys are a bit of like you're like on the higher skill level, on the spectrum. So I am like pretty interested. I feel like I can be a little bit more, I guess, stricter with the kind of things that I talk about, but also I can speak more conceptually in a sense that I know that mechanically a lot of you guys are able to like pull off the kind of stuff that we're talking about, or will likely be talking about. So looking forward to it. Let's see. So first things I typically do for reviews like this is I look at both compositions from this screen. So enemy team first, we will have a single crab on splash, with a scoped either it looks like, so slightly less mobility on a map like this, which is okay. It's tower control. Um, and then interestingly, two machines rather than like a second splash. I'm guessing it's for like objective play, um, as well as clearing top right to like get a push in. The thing that's a little bit weird to me is you're going to invest Booyah Bomb, but you also kind of want Crab to take top right. So having double machine could kind of like hinder your mobility to take that space, maybe. On your end, it looks like we have a Booyah Bomb, but it is on the Forge Pro, so it's not going to be something that you're going to play around necessarily, just because it won't be able to get a lot of them, just due to lack of painting ability, really. Um, but you do seem to at least recognize that and attempt to make up with it with the T-Tech. Generally, I'm not crazy about T-Tech. I think it's good on Flounder, but um, generally speaking, I don't think the maps are vertical enough to really warrant using it too much. But it is a pretty good weapon overall. Still pretty solid. Then we have Splash, self-explanatory, and then again E-liter, the less mobile variant. Um, what are like good wave breaker spots? I guess it would just be like a counter for, I guess from your perspective, like top left. So interesting enough. We'll just go through the game, and if I see anything, we'll point it out, I guess. So I know this map, generally speaking, is a um, pretty big like there are pretty big choke points alongside like the left side. Let's say from your perspective, right? A lot of choke points from like the left side of the map, and that's typically where people struggle to actually push. So once it dips down into like the pit, games just kind of end. And if they happen to pass there, then the game actually just KOs pretty much because a lot of people struggle. Um, One thing that's pretty cool, and it's what I'm going to be looking for though, is how you guys react to the objective moving. Because when the objective moves, you're effectively changing how the map functions as well. Because the lower, let's say from this perspective, the further up you push, the more viable the flank options up top on this map become. So we get the early pick on the Forge Pro. It's not the worst thing to ever happen. Forge Pro isn't really building for specials. You could potentially safely get a jump in. You do get the pick off. And the rotation here from the T-Tech, I guess they kind of recognized that they were potentially going to lose space in mid due to the early pick. So that T-Tech for some reason rotates to the Charger. The timing is a little bit unfortunate because since the Forge Pro died early, right? It's Im- implicitly understood that the E-liter is the safest jump. So the T-Tech rotating back here to snipe makes it such that you're effectively guaranteeing that you're going to clump yourself up on snipe. A single bomb or uh, like a crab or like machine who fortunately got picked here could punish that extremely hard, right? Because at a higher level, people understand when you die, you can expect a jump soon, right? And that would typically be the E-liter since they're the safest. But the problem here is twofold. So not only are you clumped on snipe, but the T-Tech rotating leaves Snow out alone to fend for themselves, basically. Now this isn't really playing to the strength of Forge Pro, but it's mostly because Snow and, well, in this case it makes sense because you're being flanked, but the T-Tech is effectively behind the Forge, right? So the Forge could be doing something like this with a more consistent weapon at like close range. The strength of Forge comes from the actual like crossfire utility. So in this example, let's say the T-Tech took that fight. I know the Booyah, but let's say hypothetically took that fight. Then the Pro can follow up and land high damage bullets. A lot easier for one, but also safer. You don't risk the trades. And because of the range, you can do it safely, right? But this kind of positioning on the Forge doesn't really play into the actual strength of the weapon. You might as well just play 52 or something, or a little bit of fighting here. The E-Liter does force you to drop. You get separated. I like the crab here. It's a little unfortunate. Just, it is mostly like a map issue. If you crab, you're going to very likely peek the same exact sight lines as your E-Liter. So unfortunately, that's a thing. So the crab isn't going to open up spots for the E-Liter to get kills. It could, but... And then you also have exactly the same clumping issue as earlier, where two people, well, technically three people, are on snipe, which could be pretty bad pretty quick, because Mac can drop down here and get like a free pincer, basically. Which he does. One goes down, and then you can chase that E-Liter. Yes, see. Really good play by the enemy team here. I don't like that Matt is so far back. I think it's a lot more beneficial to kind of shark the ramp, so that if your Forge Pro, for example, let's say hypothetically dives the crab right now for no reason, Matt would be there to pick it up. So that's a misplay on their part. They see it too late, and by then your splash goes down, or the enemy splash goes down. But it is in your favor, so yeah, you take those. We have a fight on right side, but then you notice maybe it wasn't called out. I'm not too sure. But you notice that the splash doesn't actually react. So right now, objective, the checkpoint already cleared. The points don't matter at this point. Go for the kill so that they can't... So that you can't risk like a snowball, basically. You're still very hyper-focused on what's going on there. And left kind of like the fight up to a 50-50. Avril can turn it into a 2v1 technically, but the E-Liter is very rarely the kind of weapon that like helps in that regard, just due to its inconsistency. Or rather downtime, not inconsistency. The biggest problem by far with this team is the way that the Forge Pro is being used. There's a lot of opportunity here to take space. You have 3 specials up. Even if a lot of maps, you kind of have like this idea of these parts of the map are very like key to winning the game. Even if you kind of just waste a special, it's good to use one to kind of clear it in advance so you can already start moving up. So like if you, let's say, tri-strike snipe, you might not have the knowledge if somebody's there or not, right? Well, that's a little redundant. But using it there forces enemies away. You'll be able to effectively understand, okay, I know nobody can be there now. And it kind of gives you something to work towards when you have an excess of specials here. If not, you're just sitting on something and not using it. You give the enemy an opportunity to like make the first move. And then you sort of lose your advantage if that's the case. Unfortunately, the splash kind of feeds, but Matt is there to pick it up. Really good positioning by Matt this time. Fighting underneath. And again, you're still like very, very scared to like push up here. And it is actually in part also due to your comp. So having the E leader is very slow. Then you also have the T Tech, which I like to think of it as kind of like a K shot. As with V shot, I think like vanilla splatter shot as well is very similar, where it's very supportive. Stick with your team. Play for special, but it's more so like play to like break chokes. But the idea is generally it's not a frontline weapon. You're not going to go and dive with it typically. And the problem with that is your Forge Pro is also the same deal. So right now your Forge Pro is trying to make up for this lack of any aggression really throughout your team. But because it's a Forge Pro, it's pretty much at a disadvantage every single time it takes a fight against this team, just due to its inconsistency, the bullet velocity. Obviously the weaknesses of Forge Pro at close range. But the problem is now you have Snow playing objective here. The E leader can't rush, right? The only person you really have taking space at this point is the Forge Pro, who's just getting diffed basically because the weapon just isn't good for that situation. So you do get kills here this time though. Good. I really like that the T-Tech push up here. It can't be too aggressive, but it's good that it's actually like taking fights alongside your splatter shot now. Do have to back up here. Like, it's okay to go for points, but you really, when you get to this kind of point where it's like, I don't know if I can make it, I don't know if I can KO, it's always good. I really like what Avrel did. Back up and play for height, play for your specials, right? And just get that one last fight, force it through, get 2 down, right? And then push from there, rather than just trying to jump on tower and pray that you can KO before they kill you. That'll work at lower levels, but you guys are at a pretty decent level right now. That shouldn't be consistent. At this point, and another thing is, like, at this point, you've already broken all the checkpoints as well. So playing slower, playing for the, like, more consistent, you'll eventually KO, right? There's very little difference between like 7 points and 5 points once all the checkpoints have been broken. These guys have the same clumping problem that you do. In fact, I think that's why they even lost the fight to begin with that got you guys that push. Good spread here. Looks like the E-leader sniped them. Not too much to say here. It's a little bit scrappy. The T-Tech completely dished the splash, which is very unfortunate. In a situation like that, let's say the T-Tech splash paired, then Forge Pro would have been able to play into its strength due to its positioning right now, and would have been able to clean up the kills. Just unfortunate how that played out. They're playing top, so your best way to deal with this would be to Crab or Booyah, which fortunately, or unfortunately actually, you only have Crab that's almost there. And they're dead too. So one thing that's like pretty important as well is if you have a fight in mid and you think you're losing it, you have to understand that opponents, again, part of like key maps, opponents want to go like 2 different places here. They want to take your snipe and they want to take top left from your point of view, right? I don't know what it's called, where the greats are, the great flank. So knowing that, and especially knowing their composition, you should already understand like what angles you can and can't peek, or what specials you're going to need in order to stop them. So like Booyah, for example, would be really good to prevent people from actually reaching either position. Crab is really good if you flank to the right by like Spinner and hit Snipe, for example, to open up your team to like drop right side. But in this kind of scenario, you're kind of caught out of position by you, I mean the splash, and get picked for it. And also knowing that a booyah is potentially part of your win condition. If you have it, it's extremely important to just give up a fight if you know you're losing it to maintain your special, especially on a forge that can't build quickly. So booyah here is just really an objective stall. I'm not too crazy about it. It's okay since it gets them off of checkpoint, right? Yes. So it does get them off of checkpoint, which could be pretty big. But at the same time, like you still have two different fights that you need to win in order to even like touch the tower as soon as the booyah goes. I probably would have liked to see it instead of on the checkpoint a little bit closer so you could follow up with like on the splash here with your two teammates. And this was very much like just laser focus on the objective. You still have to win. In order to play objective, you need map control first, right? You need to play versus, unless this is like Rainmaker and it's about to KO, right? There is still time, right? They're only at 13. You needed to go for the two people defending the tower before you went on the person defending the tower, or being on like riding the tower, especially considering that was an E leader. And typically the E leaders struggle at like closer ranges, right? So you do get the kill, but in turn you focus the tower and you went 2 down for it. So they should be able to maybe clean it up. Yes. So yeah, generally speaking, your positioning overall was a little bit like half-baked in terms of not understanding where you wanted to go for defense. You kind of got it for offense. I wasn't like too against that. Not crazy about your comp, mostly because I feel like it's too slow of a pace for a game like this. Maybe in like Splatoon 2, if you had K-Shot, it would have been okay. But generally speaking, forcing your Forge to kind of like take all of these fights. Well, you didn't really force them, but that's just how they were playing. They were playing as if they were the ones to initiate and take every single fight. Doesn't really lean well into the weapons kit and ability. Especially when you have an E leader and a splash that rides objective, right? You generally want the splash to be on spinner immediately or on, let's say as you're pushing, on right side with a crab to like maintain control on right. So that, I think you did that at one point. Although splash again was riding tower a lot, which could be a misplay considering it's your only crab. There were some awareness issues, namely with the Forge and the T-Tech. The T-Tech like leaving fights where the rest of their team is still in, and there's still potential to like win the fight outright. And the Forge Pro, one, losing special when it can't build it to begin with, and two, just taking poor fights, really. The lack of aggression isn't the fault of the player playing the Forge more than it is the pick being Forge Pro. So if you're gonna force the player to play it aggressively in order to make up for the limitations of your comp, you might as well just play a different weapon. I don't know if you one trick it or not, but anyway, I hope this helps at least a little bit. If you have any questions, my DMs are always open, and good luck, guys.